Detroit basketball. Shouts out to Jalen Rose. I know in my previous video about the Denver Nuggets, I spoke about how I was going to loathe talking about this team, the Detroit Pistons, as I'm not too educated on the subject. Though it's hard to not keep track of them, to just sort of keep your eye on them from the bottom of the leaderboards. The Detroit Pistons as an organization has rebuilt themselves in a more unique way than most rebuilding teams do. I mean, sure, they did get the first overall pick, and they picked Cade Cunningham, which is a great pick. They've done a good job at grabbing versatile players. I don't know if that's the intention that they were going for, but it is what they have. They have a few players on their team that can play multiple positions, that can do multiple things, that have different sort of skill sets, yet kind of overlap in weird ways, and players that you would not suspect are as good as they are, but they are. Jeremy Grant is a player that nobody kind of expected to be this level, yet here they are. Shouts out to the 76ers for giving up on that, and I guess the Nuggets, but what are you going to do? I would blame the 76ers, honestly, more than the Nuggets, because this Jeremy Grant, by all means, was a part of the process. But I digress. One process's trash is another team's pleasure. But now the Detroit Pistons are in a state of rebuilding? And I say that with kind of like an air quotes question mark. Imagine an air quotes question mark. I'm beginning this video over again. My girlfriend's car battery died. I had to go talk about that, take care of that. But now she's good, and I'm here back to talk about the Detroit Pistons coach, Dwayne Casey. Dwayne Casey is a proven tanks commander in this league now. Does he deserve to be an NBA coach? I believe so. I believe that he's very adequate. Maybe not a head coach, maybe an assistant coach, maybe a development coach. I don't know. This situation seems like it's probably the best situation for him because he is extremely adequate at developing players. His systems aren't too bad. His years in Toronto with DeMar and Kyle Lowry, he did a good job. It was a little bit shaky at points. His late game play calling is pretty good, but not great. He sometimes messes up and fumbles during games at putting his team in a position to win. Sometimes he messes up with the little small moves that allows the team to sort of coast into a win, whether that be timeout management or something of that nature. But it seems like the situation for him is to be at the helm of this team, to be a strong figure that these young players can look up to. And I think that's probably him in his best situation. Like, if you walked up to Dwayne Casey and you said, what's your best situation that you would be in as a coach? And I guess that's a hard question for a lot of coaches to answer. I guess you would say, having Steph Curry or LeBron James, or that would probably be the best situation. But no, I think if you ask Dwayne Casey what his best situation is as a coach, I'd say it's developing youthful talents. The versatility on this team is pretty crazy, and you can't compliment Jeremy Grant without complimenting Dwayne Casey, because without Dwayne Casey, you can't see Jeremy Grant in this position. Cade Cunningham is going to be a unique situation because it seems like on this team, the players that are already there seem to have a flow about them on the floor. The way that they developed as a team by the end of the season was a really exciting thing to see. They kind of found a flow to their offense, and like when one player would get injured, another one would step up, and a lot of those situations, like Blake Griffin leaving, was a blessing in disguise for this team because it allowed them to develop a sort of system. Their defense, all of them try to buy in as much as possible. Sometimes people's offenses are better than their defense, but hey, they try their hardest each game. At the point that I'm making this video, they played the San Antonio Spurs last night in preseason, and I caught a little bit of it, and I gotta say I was pretty impressed with how the team flows. This team is filled with players that you kind of want to root for in Saban Lee and Sadiq Bey and Jeremy Grant and Isaiah Stewart. They're all players that play with high energy, and maybe they're not the most complete players, but they complement each other on the court, which is really cool to see. I think Sadiq Bey's development has been sort of unprecedented, so you have to say that Dwayne Casey's actually kind of doing a pretty good job in this situation, because these players that were sort of nobodies or less known names are now turning into productive players that people are keeping their eyes on, and there's actually kind of excitement going on in the Motor City. So Cade Cunningham joins the team, and in my mind, the biggest task for them is to fit in this number 1 overall pick. I don't know if this is just me and my perspective, but Cade Cunningham seems like a first overall pick that just can't fit into any system. It seems like he's going to have to find his role within this offense and within this team. I could be wrong about that. I mean, Cade Cunningham could be much better and much more able than I believe that he is. But I think the task of this season is making him fit a little bit better. Because of the flow that they figured out last season, it's just weird to think about how there's this new, huge, all eyes on him type force with the first overall pick that's joining the team. This offseason, they acquired Kelly Olynyk. Before the trade deadline last year, they got Hamidou Diallo. They have Corey Joseph on the team. They have a few different faces on the team this year, and it seems like they're trying to just fill out their roster. And it's weird because it seems like their team is kind of good, and I think it may surprise some people this year. It seems like they made some acquisitions last year that were sort of not win first, but win a little bit more. Like, not saying that Corey Joseph and Kelly Olynyk will make a crazy difference on your team, but it's kind of exciting to say that you're going to have these few players on your team that are dependable. Like, dependable players are something that they really lacked last year, where the offense would fall on Saddiq Bey, who this year is looking a lot more dependable. And it seems like their offense with the starting five is seeming a lot more exciting and a lot more consistent. So Dwayne Casey sort of is doing his job in a sense, in that he is making sure that these pieces are in the right spots, doing the right thing. And I think Isaiah Stewart is showing a lot of versatility in his game that he's going to be like a big problem for opponents next year. I know at the end of last season he was balling out a little bit more, but like, you know, you always question if it's just because nobody else is playing. But the way that he sort of dominated the preseason game last night, even in the small amount of minutes that he played, it made you take a step back and say, this is some exciting stuff. I mean, look, he probably had like 8 points, but the athleticism in combination with patience. Dwayne Casey does a great job at teaching his players patience. He does a good job at convincing his players, or making his players understand that the game is going to come to you. You don't have to go to the game. You don't have to push yourself. Like, somebody else will pick up the slack. Somebody else will work hard. Don't force things. He has a more natural approach to the way that he mentors these players, and I really think that that's a good thing for this team. And he obviously has his disagreements with Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin, but I think it's just those players that don't buy in. Those players just get out, because we're building something. We're building something that's good, and we're building something that's going to be helpful in the future. Now, will they fire him as soon as a better coach gets available on the market and they're at a sort of higher opportunity where they seem like they can make a playoff push or that they can do better? They're firing him like a snap, like done, over, goodbye Dwayne Casey. But for now, in my eyes, watching these games, you say, oh, this is good for now. This is good for now. We're excited about this. So Dwayne Casey has done a good job with Detroit and ensuring that the players and the way that they're getting mentored are not through stupid veteran leadership that may have been there last year between Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin. I mean, you might as well get those players who don't want to play to their maximum ability out. It doesn't matter if they perform well on whatever team that they get to. It's about what's happening here. As soon as you get your eyes on a Detroit Pistons basketball game, you're going to be saying to yourself, this is not as bad as I thought it was. Because last season, at points, it was painful, just injuries and losing players and being unsure. But this season, it seems like they're a little bit more sure. I hope that they're as surefire as I think they are to make at least teams have a run for their money. I feel as though a team in a similar situation last year was the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I think that this year, maybe even both those teams, but Detroit did a better job this season at ensuring that their bench and their team overall is well-rounded and developing for the future. And I think that they're doing a pretty good job at it. So I'm just going to go to my players to... And I'm not going to make the player to watch Cade Cunningham. We reduced the players to watch from 3 to 1. My videos were getting way too long. And not that I minded doing them. I love doing this sort of research and thinking about it analytically. But my Dallas Mavericks video ended up being 17 plus minutes. More if I didn't cut 90% of it out. I re-uploaded it. 14 minutes. Nobody's watching that thing. What are we going to do? My player to watch, and put him on your fantasy radar. Put him on your last pick for the fantasy, second to last pick in fantasy. But Saddiq Bey. Saddiq Bey had 13 points last night. Despite not doing wonderfully and taking some iffy shots, I think that he's going to develop into a Carmelo Anthony type player. And that's I could be way off, but from what I've seen, the way he sort of plays around in the pick and roll, the way he sort of pops shots and either stays sort of dormant or moves around and uses kind of like his big body and mobility to get around, he kind of reminds me of a Carmelo Anthony type player. And I'm not saying he has the trajectory that Carmelo Anthony has, but in terms of being productive on this team, he's going to be the one that they look for to get shots this season, to make buckets, to get them a bucket. He can play isolation ball. He has a pretty keen eye for passing. Not the greatest eye for passing, but a keen eye for passing. Solid rebounder for his size. And I think he's going to be one of the fantasy steals of this season. I mean, at the end of last season, he was a fantasy steal through and through. And I don't want this segment to become just a fantasy who, what, where, when. I think that Saddiq Bey is going to be a beneficial, and I'm thinking about fantasy just because it's right around the corner. Saddiq Bey is going to be one of those players for our mini statisticians out here who is just like, wow, this player is playing pretty well on this team. I'm going to anticipate that he probably gets like 15 points a game, 4 and 4. But I'm excited for this team. I really am excited for this team. So that brings me to my predictions. My anticipation for the Detroit Pistons this year are not that they're the worst team in the league. I think that the East is actually a little bit better than people would like to believe. I don't think that they'll give the West really a run for their money, but I think the bottom of the West is worse than the bottom of the East. And I think that the Detroit Pistons this year are going to win 24 games.